It was a truth universally whispered in court that a girl raised beside a future king should learn early how to hold her heart with both hands, because someday he might not take it gently. Ayla Wilder had, unfortunately, believed otherwise. Sunlight streamed through the council chamber's tall windows, gilding the floor in warm gold that did nothing to soften the cold words being spoken. Prince Rylan will be betrothed to Lady Selene of Herr Omer, Lord Winthor declared, with the satisfaction of a man who enjoyed arranging someone else's heartbreak. The alliance is essential for the realm. Essential. Of course. A perfect way to say, Ayla, please step aside while the kingdom rearranges your entire life without your consent. She kept her expression serene. She had trained for this, how to look unshakable while wanting to throw a chair at someone. Across the chamber, Prince Rylan stood tall but tense, shoulders pulled tight, guilt written all over him. He didn't look at her. Impressive, really. Cowardice paired with royal tailoring always looked so refined. Ayla placed her hands neatly before her. Well, she said, with bright, lethal politeness, I suppose congratulations are in order. The elders around him shifted, uncertain whether she was being gracious or preparing to murder them with a hairpin. Rylan finally looked at her then. His blue eyes flickered. Regret, sorrow, something softer beneath. Too little, too late. Ayla, he murmured, voice low, stripped of royal authority. This wasn't my choice. Of course not, she replied sweetly. Kings never choose. They simply obey. Lord Winthor stiffened. Rylan tried again. Please, let me explain. She lifted her hand lightly. Truly, Your Highness, there is no need. I understand perfectly. The kingdom needs Selene. The council needs her lands. And you? Her breath caught, but she controlled it. Need to pretend this doesn't hurt either of us. Silence draped over the chamber like a shroud. Inside her chest, her heart said something far less poised. You promised me. You said the future was ours. But she would die before letting those words slip through her teeth. She bowed, not deeply enough to seem humbled, just enough to be politically correct. May your union bring prosperity to the realm, and may you both choke on it. But she was dignified, not dramatic. When she turned and stepped out of the council room, the air in the corridor felt thicker, heavy with whispers, memories, expectations that had just crumbled at her feet. She walked steadily, past marble columns, past guards pretending not to pity her, past servants who had seen her grow from a stubborn little girl to the woman everyone believed would one day be queen. Everyone had been wrong. She reached her chambers, closed the door gently, and stood in the heavy quiet. Her mask, polished, practiced, perfect, held for exactly 5 seconds. Then it slipped. She braced, her hands on the edge of her writing desk, breath catching. The ache hit her with humiliating force, sharp, hot, unfair. Her chest tightened, her throat trembled. He chose duty over me. Worse, he didn't even fight. A bitter laugh slipped out, thin and shaky. Duty, she whispered into the empty room. Yes, what an excellent word for betrayal with good manners. She straightened, wiping the emotion from her face, from her breathing, from her posture. She would not break for a man who broke faith first. If she had to leave the palace with nothing but her dignity, then she would leave with it gleaming. She packed her trunks slowly, neatly, refusing to let tears fall. Dignity was a crown she could still wear, and she intended to wear it well. By sunset, She crossed the palace courtyard toward the waiting carriage. Nobles pretended not to stare. A few offered polite words. Others whispered pity behind gloved hands. Ayla ignored all of them. Rylan stood at the top of the palace steps, watching her with a look that might have undone her if she'd let it. But she didn't look long enough to find out. He called her name once, quiet, cracked. She didn't stop. The carriage door closed with a soft thud. Final, controlled, devastating only on the inside. Across the courtyard, half shadowed beneath the archway of the training yard, a pair of dark eyes followed her with surprising focus. General Cale Arden, newly appointed commander of the Royal Guard, stood watching her departure. He had seen enough broken soldiers in his lifetime to recognize courage shaped by heartbreak. The slight tremor in her hand, the straightness of her spine, the way she walked away from a future that everyone had once believed belonged to her. A soldier beside him muttered, "Shame about Lady Ayla." Cale didn't respond. He rarely wasted words, but something shifted in his expression. Quiet and resolute, an understanding that some losses carve deeper wounds than war ever could. Ayla thought she'd close the door on him, on the prince who shattered her future with one obedient nod. But destiny was already moving, and soon both Rylan and Cale would be standing in her path. Only one of them would earn the right to stand beside her. It was astonishing, really, how a kingdom could spend years pretending you didn't exist, only to explode with whispers the moment your boots touched its gates again. Ayla Wilder stepped through the stone archway of the capital, with the kind of practiced calm one only earned through heartbreak, distance, and extensive medical training. The guards straightened when they saw her crest, healer's mark, newly certified by the Northern Order. Respectable, admired, and, unfortunately, highly visible. Just what she needed. "Is that Lady Ayla?" someone murmured. "A healer now, I heard." "I thought she'd never show her face again." Ayla smiled without showing teeth. "Cute," she muttered under her breath. "They act like I committed treason, not got dumped for a diplomatic dowry." She kept walking, chin lifted, cloak fluttering in the warm breeze rushing down from the palace walls. She wasn't here for nostalgia. She wasn't here for revenge. She wasn't here for him. She was here because the kingdom had requested a healer with her specialty, and the order didn't take royal invitations lightly. Besides, she'd convinced herself she was completely, unequivocally unaffected. Right up until she reached the palace courtyard. A patrol of soldiers trained in formation, steel clashing rhythmically. Sunlight flashed across armor. The scent of pine oil and dust drifted in the air. It should have felt familiar. Instead, her stomach dropped in a way she absolutely refused to acknowledge. She tightened her grip on her satchel. In and out, help who needs helping, ignore ghosts, pretend the past is a dream you definitely didn't cry over. "Lady Ayla," a young servant nearly tripped, bowing. We didn't expect you so early." "Good," she said briskly. "I enjoy disappointing expectations. It builds character." He blinked, unsure whether she was joking. She was, mostly. As she crossed the courtyard, whispers swelled behind her like a rising tide. "She looks different. Stronger. No wonder the prince—" Ayla cut her eyes toward them, and the whispering died instantly. Amazing what a well-honed glare could accomplish. She inhaled deeply, letting the moment settle, then froze, because he was there. Rylan. Prince Rylan of Velisar stood at the far end of the courtyard, speaking with two advisors, until one of them subtly inclined his head toward her. Ryland turned, and the world jolted. He looked older, in that frustrating way men sometimes did. Sharper jaw, broader shoulders, posture weighted by responsibility. His princely tunic was the deep blue she used to tease him about, saying it made him look too perfect for his own good. His eyes found her, stunned, unshielded, a heartbeat too raw. Ayla's first instinct, run. Her second, punch him. Her third, the one she actually obeyed, lift her chin and pretend she was utterly unbothered. She gave him a polite nod, the kind one offered distant acquaintances, the kind that said, "I remember absolutely nothing of the emotional devastation you caused. Thank you." Ryland took a step toward her. She immediately turned to the guard captain approaching. "Please tell me you're the one I report to." "I'd love to avoid causing a public scandal before midday." The guard chuckled. "General Kale is expecting you. He's—" "Here," came a voice behind her. Ayla pivoted. General Carl Arden stood tall, armored, expression composed, yet unmistakably focused on her. There was something about him, solid, grounded, quietly assessing, like he saw more than what people showed on the surface. His gaze brushed down her cloak, her heeler's crest, the set of her shoulders, not judging, understanding. "Lady Ayla," he said with a respectful incline of his head, "welcome back." "I appreciate the greeting," she replied. "Do you plan on staring at me like the rest of the courtyard? Or will you be the sane one today?" A corner of his mouth lifted, a near smile. Just making sure the rumors weren't exaggerations. "Oh, and what did they say?" "That you returned stronger." Ayla blinked. That was not the answer she expected, not the answer she was prepared for. Before she could respond, the air behind her shifted. Rylan approached. She sensed him before she saw him, because heartbreak, unfortunately, had excellent memory. "Ayla," he said softly. She didn't turn fully. No need. A slight angle of her body kept Kyle in view and placed Rylan at her periphery. An intentional balance she doubted either man missed. "Your Highness," she replied coolly, "I trust the kingdom still stands despite my long absence." His expression cracked. "I didn't know you would be among the healers." "Of course not," she said lightly. "It's not as though we communicate anymore." A flash of pain flickered in his eyes. Good. Let him feel something for once. Kale cleared his throat, stepping subtly closer as if sensing tension, or offering support without announcing it. The gesture was small, but Ayla noticed. The courtyard seemed to notice too. Ryland's jaw tightened. "Ayla," he tried again, voice low. "I never meant—" "Oh, please don't," she cut in. "We're not going to revisit ancient history. I'm here to work, not to reminisce." Her heartbeat thudded too loudly. She prayed no one could hear it. Kale's gaze lingered on her with a softness that surprised her. Not pity, something steadier, something that said, "You're not alone in this." Ryland saw it. A muscle in his cheek twitched. "General," he said, tone shifting, "I trust you'll ensure she's given whatever she needs." Kyle nodded. "Of course." Ayla exhaled, deciding that breathing was probably necessary if she wanted to remain conscious. "If the introductions are done, I'd like to begin my assessment of the infirmary." Kale gestured for her to follow. "This way." She started walking. Ryland didn't move. He simply watched her go. His gaze followed her with a silent intensity she refused to acknowledge. Regret, longing, something unguarded burning behind his eyes. She kept her back straight, her steps firm, her mask firmly in place. But as she crossed the courtyard, she felt it. His stare like a vow he was forming in real time. A vow she wasn't meant to hear. This time, I won't lose her. The universe had an impressive sense of humor, Ayla decided, because nothing else could explain why she found herself cornered in a quiet corridor with Prince Rylan blocking the only exit. She'd come to deliver a list of urgent medical supplies to the steward. Instead, she turned a corner and nearly collided with the one man she had spent years perfecting the art of avoiding. Ayla, he breathed, as if her name alone was a prayer he wasn't worthy to say. Oh, wonderful, she muttered, stepping back. Exactly what I hoped for today. A private ambush. Rylan winced, but, credit where it was due, he didn't retreat. Please, just hear me. I need to say what I should have said years ago. No, she said immediately. You haven't even heard the apology yet. And already I don't want it. She crossed her arms. Efficiency is one of my many talents. He looked pained, which only made her spine stiffen. She would not be softened by sad blue eyes and royal guilt. Not again. I made a mistake, he said quietly. Ah, she replied. Yes, the famous royal understatement, a mistake, much like misplacing a scroll or tripping over a stair. Except this particular mistake involved betraying me in front of half the kingdom and marrying someone else for land rights. Very casual, barely worth mentioning. He closed his eyes. Ayla. The alliance was the only way to stop a war. I'm sure the kingdom is grateful, she said lightly. Truly, and I'm thrilled you saved thousands of lives by sacrificing exactly one heart. That heart mattered to me. She huffed out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Past tense noted. Rylan stepped closer, voice cracking. It still matters, more than I ever admitted, more than I was allowed to admit. There it was. The word she hated most. Allowed. Duty had always been the crown's favorite weapon, and she had been naive enough to stand at the wrong end of it. Rylan, she said, tone turning colder, steadier. You don't get to rewrite history because it hurts now. I begged you to stand with me. You bowed to the council instead. He flinched. I thought I was doing what was right. Oh, I know. Heroes always do. She offered a brittle smile. Unfortunately, right choices sometimes leave very real casualties. I never wanted to hurt you. And yet, she said, waving a hand at the invisible ruins between them, here we are. The silence between them wasn't empty. It pulsed, thick, aching, full of everything they never said. Rylan looked at her, as though searching for remnants of the girl he once knew. But Ayla wasn't that girl anymore. I came back to work, she said firmly, not to sift through old wounds. He swallowed hard. I wasn't finished. That seems to be a pattern with us, she replied. You never finish, you start, you promise, you hesitate, and then I'm the one left holding consequences. Rylan took another step, desperation edging his voice. Ayla, please, let me apologize. Properly. Let me explain. Explanations don't change truth, she cut in, and certainly not the past. He opened his mouth, but a shift in the air behind him interrupted the moment. Cale stood at the far end of the corridor. He hadn't announced himself, but Ayla sensed him before she saw him. Still, watchful, presence firm enough to steady the ground around her. His gaze flicked from Rylan to her, and though he said nothing, something protective settled across his expression. Rylan followed her line of sight, and his jaw clenched. General, he said stiffly. Cale gave a respectful nod. Your Highness. His eyes returned to Ayla, assessing, reading the tension in her shoulders, the slight shake she was hiding behind carefully controlled breath. He didn't ask if she was all right. He didn't need to. Ayla straightened. I need to return to the infirmary. Rylan reached for her wrist, hesitant, almost afraid to touch her. Ayla, don't walk away again. Not like this. She stepped back before he made contact. You don't get to ask that of me. Ayla. No. Her voice didn't break. She was unreasonably proud of that. I lived through your apology already. Years ago. The moment you chose the crown over me. Anything you say now is just echo. He looked shattered. Good. Let him feel the collapse she'd survived. Without another word, Ayla turned and strode down the hallway. Past Rylan, past the memories clawing at her ribs, past the life she once believed she'd have. Her footsteps were steady, her mask intact. But the moment she slipped into an empty storage chamber, she shut the door softly and pressed her forehead against the cool wood. For a few breaths, only a few, she let the tremor in her chest exist. Why does his voice still get to me? Why does regret sound so much like hope when I know better? She inhaled, slow, determined. She wouldn't let one conversation undo the years she'd spent rebuilding herself. She wasn't 18 anymore. She wasn't foolish. She wasn't fragile. She was hers. A soft knock sounded. Ayla froze. I'm busy, she called, steadying her voice. It's me, came Cale's deep, even tone. She hesitated, then opened the door a few inches, enough to see him leaning against the wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable, but gentler than any she'd seen in days. You left quickly, he said. I had work to do. He didn't call out the lie. He didn't ask what happened. He simply watched her with that quiet, attentive patience she was unused to receiving. Are you sure you're all right? He asked finally. Ayla lifted her chin. Completely, perfectly, irritatingly fine. Kyle's gaze softened, and for a moment she felt seen in a way that made her breath falter. He straightened from the wall and stepped closer, but not too close, just near enough to be unmistakably on her side. His voice was low, steady, certain. You deserve better than this, Ayla. And something inside her, some guarded place she didn't know, still had a door, shifted open just a fraction. Ayla didn't expect to find Cale waiting for her outside the infirmary the next morning, arms crossed, posture relaxed in that disarming way that made him seem both immovable and quietly thoughtful. She froze mid-step. Are you guarding the door? She asked dryly, or planning to interrogate me about my emotional well-being? Neither, Kyle replied. I'm here to walk you in. She blinked. Walk me in? I think I can handle a door, General. He nodded. I know. But after yesterday, I thought it might be easier. Easier. Kind. Steady. Support she hadn't asked for, but somehow needed. Cale, she sighed, pushing past him. You don't have to play protector. I'm not that fragile. I never said you were. She stopped, turned back. His expression was unreadable, but something gentle lived beneath the surface. He continued, but no one should face a prince alone if they don't want to. The air left her chest in a slow, uneven exhale. I didn't ask for help. You didn't have to. He walked beside her through the infirmary doors, slow enough for her to match his pace, respectful enough not to crowd her. Ayla wasn't used to this. Help that wasn't sharp or demanding. Attention that wasn't tangled with history or regret. She tried to shake it off. It clung anyway. So, she said, flicking her braid behind her shoulder, is this your leadership style? Watch everyone until they start behaving? Only when necessary. And you consider me necessary? His mouth twitched. Let's just say you attract trouble. She snorted. I attract royalty. Trouble is merely the side effect. Kale actually smiled. Small, but real. It startled her more than Ryland's apology yesterday. Inside the infirmary, apprentices rushed around them, sorting vials, adjusting bed linens, organizing herbs. Ayla slipped seamlessly into the space, giving orders with crisp efficiency. Boil the water first, not after, she reminded one. No, not that salve, unless you want hives on top of infection, she told another. Who rearranged the surgical thread? I leave for 5 minutes and the world burns. Kale followed quietly, watching her command the room with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. There was no pity in his gaze, just respect. When she finally paused, Kale approached her table. You're good at this. She raised a brow. If that's meant to flatter me, you'll have to try harder. It's not flattery, he said. It's observation. Well, she muttered, adjusting a stack of bandages. I prefer honesty over sweet words, if that helps you craft future compliments. He huffed a soft breath. Noted. But then the atmosphere shifted. Subtle, sharp, undeniable. Alia didn't need to turn to know why. Rylan had entered the infirmary. She felt him before she saw him. That frustrating, familiar pull, like a thread, tugging at her ribs. Kyle noticed too. His body stilled, shoulders straightening, eyes narrowing slightly. Not territorial, not aggressive. Protective. Rylan crossed the room, trying and failing to mask the way his gaze locked onto the two of them standing close. His expression flickered between guilt and something much darker. Ayla, he said quietly. She kept her tone crisp. Your Highness? His jaw tightened. He hated when she called him that. Good. I was told you inspected the southern barracks this morning, he said, without notifying anyone. Ayla shrugged. I needed to assess their medical supplies. I didn't realize I required royal permission to walk. You don't, Ryland said quickly. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. Kyle's gaze sharpened at that. Ayla forced a smile. Safe? I'm a healer, not a glass sculpture. Ryland stepped closer. Kyle stepped subtly closer too. Not in challenge, but in a quiet promise that someone was in her corner now. The triangle of tension crackled like a storm trapped between stone walls. Ryland's voice softened. I only meant that. I worry. Well, Ayla said, you have an entire kingdom to worry about. I'm sure your list is full. Ayla, I'm working, she cut in, and you're interrupting. He looked wounded. She pretended not to notice. Kale cleared his throat. Barely a sound, but enough to reclaim balance, enough to ease the pressure. Ryland straightened. We can speak later, he murmured, privately. Unlikely, she said. I'm very busy. He held her gaze a moment longer, something fierce, something aching, and then left the infirmary with steps too quick to be calm. Alia let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Kale watched the door swing shut. He's not handling this well. Not my problem, she replied. It used to be. And look how well that ended. Kale didn't argue. Instead, he handed her a jar of antiseptic, as though grounding her in the present, away from spiraling thoughts. You don't owe him anything, he said. I know that, she said quickly. Do you? Ayla's pulse stumbled. She hated that. Hated how easily both men could shift her equilibrium, but in different ways. Rylan pulled at the past she'd buried. Kale steadied the present she was trying to build. She rubbed her temples. Why does everything feel complicated? Because you're human, Kyle said simply, and because you care more than you admit. She looked at him then. Really looked. At the calm steadiness in his eyes, the strength he never flaunted, the gentleness she didn't know men like him could possess. It tugged something inside her she wasn't ready to name. I don't want a new problem, she muttered. Kale shook his head softly. I'm not a problem, Ayla. That's exactly what a problem would say. He smiled. Again, small, warm, disarming. But behind her, she heard another whisper ripple through the infirmary. Did you see the way the general looks at her? And another. The prince won't like that. And another, quieter. Maybe she's finally moved on. Her heartbeat skittered. She wasn't sure what she wanted. She wasn't sure who she trusted. She wasn't sure why Kale's presence felt like an anchor she hadn't realized she was searching for. Ayla turned away to reorganize vials, pretending her hands weren't trembling. I should get back to work. Kale didn't push. He didn't hover. He simply nodded once, slow and certain, before stepping back. But his voice, soft, steady, impossibly sincere, followed her as she pretended to be unaffected. You're not alone here, he said. Not anymore. That sentence hit deeper than she intended to let it. And when she walked away, the question that rose inside her terrified her more than any battlefield injury she had ever treated. What if the man I needed was never the one I loved? Rylan had never been afraid of war, nor council chambers, nor the politics that came with a crown he'd been raised to wear like armor. But Ayla Wilder, her silence terrified him, her distance hollowed him, and her eyes, once warm, once his, now met him with a cool politeness that felt like punishment crafted by gods who knew exactly where he bled. He stood alone in his private study, hands braced on the edge of the table, breath unsteady. Maps and treaties lay scattered before him, untouched. His scribes waited outside, but he couldn't focus on matters of the realm. Not when the only matter that felt like life or death was the woman who refused to look at him the way she used to. I broke her heart, he whispered into the empty room. And for what? Fear? Cowardice disguised as duty? His throat tightened. She'll never forgive me. A knock sounded. Rylan straightened quickly, composing his face. A guard entered. Your Highness, Lady Ayla has arrived for her scheduled meeting regarding the barracks' medical review. His heart jolted. Send her in. The guard hesitated. She's speaking with General Kyle first. Of course she was. Rylan clenched his jaw, dismissed the guard, and forced himself to breathe. He would face her. He would speak. He would try, even if trying came too late. When Ayla finally stepped into the room, her presence carved the air cleanly. She looked confident, purposeful, untouchable. And beside her stood Kale, who seemed impossibly steady at her side. Rylan hated how natural that looked. We're here to discuss the barracks' supply shortages, Ayla said briskly, dropping a stack of notes on his desk. No greeting, no softness. Rylan swallowed. Thank you. I appreciate your dedication. She did not respond. Kale crossed his arms. I'll remain here in case she needs to reference the structural reports. Rylan understood exactly what that meant. I'm not leaving her alone with you. For once, he didn't blame him. General, Rylan said tightly, Your presence is noted. Kyle didn't flinch. So is yours. Ayla sighed. Wonderful. I love when men posture around me. It makes my workday feel so productive. Kyle's expression softened with amusement. Ryland's did not. Lady Ayla, Ryland said, ignoring the jab. May we speak privately? No, she said immediately. It's important. And yet, I'm still saying no. Kale stepped slightly forward. If she said no, she meant it. Ayla held up a hand. Kale, I can handle talking to the future king. I simply don't want to. Kale inclined his head. Understood. I'll be outside if you need anything. His voice gentled. Anything. Ayla's breath hitched, just barely. But she nodded. Kale left the room, and Ryland felt the door close like fate sealing them together. Ayla remained standing, arms crossed. You have 2 minutes, then I'm leaving. He inhaled shakily. Ayla, I didn't betray you because I didn't love you. She froze. He took a step closer, cautiously, as one would approach something sacred and wounded. I chose the alliance because I was told, repeatedly, that if I didn't secure Harrowmere's support, my father would plunge the kingdom into war. Thousands would die. You would be in danger. They said, his voice cracked. They said, if I chose you, the people would blame you for every casualty. They would never accept you as queen. Her heartbeat stumbled. So you broke me instead? I thought I was protecting you. Ayla let out a sharp, breathless laugh. You protected me by ruining me? Marvelous strategy. Truly genius. I was afraid, he said desperately. Not of the council, not of the alliance. I was afraid of failing you, afraid of losing you, afraid I wouldn't be strong enough to keep you safe. Newsflash, she snapped. You lost me anyway. Yes, his shoulders dropped. And I've regretted it every day since. Silence filled the room, heavy, trembling, unbearably intimate. Ayla looked away first. Her voice softened despite herself. Rylan, you made your choice. And I would unmake it 1,000 times if I could. Regret isn't a time machine, she whispered. No, he murmured. But understanding can be. Let me show you I'm not that man anymore. Ayla's chest tightened painfully. She didn't want to hear this. She didn't want old wounds whispered open. She didn't want to imagine what might have been, or what still could be. She forced a scoff. You think a confession changes anything? No, he said. But maybe it changes something in me. She hesitated. That honesty, raw, exposed, she had never seen him give it to anyone but her. And suddenly, Kale's steadiness flashed through her mind. The way he watched her, the way he protected without claiming, the way he didn't make her do all the emotional labor. Rylan had been her first love. Kale was becoming something she couldn't name. Confusion wrapped around her ribs like vines. I don't know what you expect from me, she whispered. Nothing, Rylan said. Nothing, except the chance to prove myself worthy of your forgiveness. That's not how forgiveness works. Then show me how. Her throat tightened. Something inside her wavered, tilted between the past and the possibility of something else entirely. She needed distance, desperately. I should go. Ayla. But she was already moving toward the door. She stepped into the corridor just as a group of visiting nobles approached. They bowed to Rylan as he followed her out, but Rylan ignored them entirely. Instead, in full view of his court, he reached toward her, not touching, but close, impossibly close, and whispered, voice breaking. Ayla, please. The nobles gasped. Advisors froze. Even Kale, standing several paces away, straightened sharply. This was new. Rylan had never shown vulnerability in public, never let emotion crack through his princely mask. Ayla's heart slammed against her ribs as the court watched their prince reveal the one truth he had always hidden. He loved her, still, painfully, unmistakably. She stepped back, shaken. Ryland's eyes held hers, blue, unshielded, pleading. And for the first time since returning, Ayla felt her world tilt dangerously, painfully, impossibly between two men. One who had once broken her to save her, and one who would never break her at all. What am I supposed to do with this? She thought, breath unsteady. Because now, even she couldn't pretend she didn't feel it. Ryland's vulnerability, Kale's steadiness, her own heart no longer certain of anything. And as the court stared in stunned silence, Ayla realized she was no longer standing on solid ground. She was standing at the edge of something she had never expected to face again. Ryland's voice trembled. Ayla, please don't walk away. She didn't move. She couldn't breathe. She could only stare at the man who once shattered her and see him break in front of everyone. The crisis began with raised voices in the council chamber and ended with Ayla being summoned without warning, never a sign of anything good. She walked into the room with her healer's satchel slung over her shoulder and a sinking feeling in her stomach. A messenger stumbled forward. Lady Ayla, the Western caravans were attacked. Survivors were brought to the courtyard. They're injured, badly. Ayla's breath sharpened. How many? 7, maybe more incoming. Before she could respond, 2 things happened at once. Kyle stepped to her side, stance firm, ready. Rylan moved behind her, quiet but instantly commanding. It was ridiculous how instinctively both men reacted to her presence. One a shield, the other a shadow, she could feel even without seeing. Ayla exhaled slowly. I need space to work, and order, and absolutely no arguing from the royal men orbiting me today. Kale's mouth twitched. I don't argue. Rylan shot him a look. You make your disagreements very visible. Kyle didn't deny it. Ayla rolled her eyes. Wonderful. 2 versions of protection and both equally inconvenient. But as they escorted her toward the courtyard, she couldn't deny the truth humming beneath her ribs. She didn't hate their presence. Not Kyle's steady force at her right shoulder, nor Ryland's quiet, watchful warmth at her left. It was everything else she hated. The pressure, the memories, the way her heart insisted on being unreasonable. The courtyard was chaos. Injured travelers lay on makeshift cots, groaning as servants rushed with water and blankets. Blood stained the stone steps. Ayla's voice snapped into command. I need clean cloths, boiling water, all available antiseptic, and someone who actually knows how to follow instructions. A few apprentices scrambled. Kale immediately positioned himself between her and the growing crowd, hand on the hilt of his sword, scanning every corner. He looked like a wall, unmovable, impenetrable. Rylan, meanwhile, didn't posture, didn't step closer, didn't draw attention. He simply coordinated everything behind the scenes, ordering guards to form a perimeter, assigning messengers, ensuring no one disrupted her work. Ayla moved from patient to patient, her breath steady, her hands steady, her heart anything but. At one point she reached for a bandage, but another hand reached at the same time. Ryland's. Their fingers brushed. It was nothing. It was everything. She recoiled first, not out of disgust, out of fear for what her pulse did when he touched her. She turned sharply toward Kale's broad back. grounding herself in his presence. He glanced at her, reading her without asking. "You're doing well," he murmured. She swallowed. "I'm functioning. That's more than most can do in a crisis." Rylan overheard. Of course he did, and his jaw tightened. Not in anger. In jealousy so quiet it almost broke her. After an hour of relentless work, the courtyard finally calmed. The worst wounds were treated. Lives were no longer slipping through her fingers. Ayla sank onto a low stone wall, exhausted. Cale approached first. Naturally, he stood a respectful distance away, but still felt closer than anyone had a right to. "You saved them," he said simply. "You helped," she replied. "No," he said. "I kept swords pointed outward. You kept death pointed away." Ayla's breath caught. Ryland furrowed his brow, stepping closer. "You shouldn't minimize what you did. You held that entire courtyard together." She looked between them, Cale steady as a fortress, Rylan earnest as a wound that never healed. And inside her chest, something fractured under the weight of it. Cale would give her stability. Rylan gave her a history she couldn't shake. Cale made her feel safe. Rylan made her feel known. Cale's gaze lingered on her with quiet admiration. Ryland's gaze held 20 years of shared memories and unspoken ache. Ayla pressed a hand to her forehead. "I don't want this. I didn't come back to—" Her voice faltered. "To be torn in half." Ryland stepped closer. "You're not torn. You're trying to decide whether to trust me again." "And failing miserably," she snapped, too tired to filter her pain. Cale's expression softened. "You don't have to choose anything right now." Ryland stiffened. "Don't tell her that. She's overwhelmed," Cale replied calmly. "She deserves time." "Time is what lost her in the first place," Rylan hissed. Their voices cracked against each other. Quiet, sharp, dangerous. Ayla stood abruptly, anger flaring hot. "Stop, both of you." They froze. She took a shaky breath. "I can't think when you're pulling me in opposite directions." Rylan stepped back instantly, guilt carved into his face. Kyle stayed still, steady, giving her the calm she desperately needed. Ayla's voice lowered. "I'm attracted to you," she said quietly, looking at Cale first. "I didn't expect that. I didn't ask for it." Cale didn't move, but something warm flickered in his eyes. Then she turned toward Rylan. "And I still love you. Damn you for that." Rylan's breath broke. "Ayla." "But love," she continued, "is not trust. Love is not safety. Love is not enough." Her voice trembled. "And I don't know what to do with that." She walked a few steps away from them, clasping her hands behind her neck, trying to steady her breathing. The courtyard was quiet now, too quiet, as though even the wind held its breath. Kyle approached her slowly, carefully, respectfully. His voice was low, unshakably sincere. "If you chose me," he said, each word deliberate, each one meant, "I would never let you regret it." Ayla closed her eyes, her heart clenched, and for the first time, she realized she might break, no matter what choice she made. Ayla had treated soldiers with shattered bones and mothers with fevered infants, had stitched wounds and calmed men dying of arrow strikes. But nothing, absolutely nothing, was as exhausting as sitting alone with her own heart. She sat on the edge of her small chamber bed, elbows on her knees, hands tangled in her hair. The room was dim, lit only by a single candle flickering on the windowsill. The flame danced, stubborn and hopeful, which annoyed her deeply. "I don't want to feel this," she muttered to no one. "I don't want to love him. I don't want any of this. But the truth pressed against her ribs with merciless honesty. She had never stopped loving Rylan. Not really. Not even after the council tore them apart. Not even after he bowed to duty instead of her. Not even after she rebuilt herself from the ashes he left behind. She wanted to hate him. She tried. But love was inconvenient like that. It stayed even when logic begged it to leave. A soft knock broke the stillness. Ayla stiffened. If this is another guard asking if I'm emotionally stable, I swear I'll... It's me, Kyle's low voice answered from the other side. Of course it was. Ayla opened the door with a sigh she didn't have the strength to hide. Kale stood there, arms relaxed at his sides, expression gentle enough to undo her in one breath. He didn't push his way in. He didn't assume. He simply waited for her to decide. She stepped aside. He entered quietly, the way he always did, like someone who respected the spaces he entered, including the ones inside her. You've been distant today, he said. Today? She let out a tired laugh. Try every day since I returned. He tilted his head, studying her with that steady, unshakable attentiveness. You're hurting. Brilliant deduction. And you're avoiding the reason why. Ayla crossed her arms and leaned against the wall. I'm not avoiding anything. I just don't want to talk about him. Kyle didn't flinch. You still love him. The words hit like an arrow, not because they shocked her, but because they were true. Ayla looked away. I don't want to. I know, and I wish it had faded. I know, and I hate that it didn't. Kyle's expression softened with something that wasn't pity, something far kinder. Love doesn't disappear because it hurts. If it did, the world would be much easier. Her throat tightened. You deserve someone who isn't this complicated. Complicated isn't a flaw, he said quietly. It's honest. Ayla's chest pinched painfully. Kyle, I don't want to hurt you. You won't, he said. And even though she knew it wasn't true, even though choices always had casualties, he said it with such calm conviction, she almost believed him. A long silence stretched between them. Then Kyle spoke again, voice low and certain. I knew the moment I offered myself that your heart wasn't free. I knew you still loved him. Why would you? Because I see you, he said simply. All of you, not just the parts you're proud of. A single tear escaped before she could stop it. She wiped it away quickly, cursing under her breath. I don't want this triangle. I don't want drama. I want to breathe. And you will, Kyle replied. But first, you need to face him. Ayla swallowed hard. Face him. She wasn't sure she could. But fate, or the universe's cruel sense of timing, didn't care about her readiness. A guard sprinted down the hall, nearly colliding with Kale. General, Prince Rylan requests Lady Ayla's presence immediately. Ayla stiffened. Is anyone dying? No, my lady. He's in the northern courtyard. He's doing something. The guard struggled to describe it, which immediately concerned her. Kale nodded and stepped aside. Go, he murmured. Not demanding, not claiming, just giving her the space she needed. Ayla walked past him, though her fingers brushed his arm as she passed. A silent apology, a silent thank you, a silent admission of confusion. Her heart hammered with every step down the corridor. She wasn't prepared to see Rylan. She wasn't prepared for more emotion. She wasn't prepared for anything at all. But when she stepped into the northern courtyard, she stopped breathing altogether. Lanterns hung from the stone archways, casting warm light across the open space. Rylan stood alone in the center, holding something in his hands, something small, polished, familiar. Her heart stuttered. No, it couldn't be. But it was. A wooden carving. Their carving. The one they'd made when they were children, shaped like two intertwined hawks. They'd buried it under the old willow tree on the training grounds, promising to dig it up on the day he asked her to marry him. She hadn't thought about it in years. Rylan held it gently, as though it were a relic. He lifted his gaze when she approached. A soft, broken smile touched his lips. They uprooted the willow when the new bridge was built, he said quietly. I found this in the soil. I thought, maybe it wasn't lost after all. Ayla's breath shook. He stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. I kept it with me, every day, even when I pretended I'd forgotten, even when I tried to force myself to let you go. Her chest tightened painfully. Rylan, you deserved a man who would protect your heart, not hide behind duty. His voice trembled openly, no mask, no royal composure. I failed you once. I won't do it again. Ayla swallowed hard. She felt Cale's words echoing inside her. You need to face him. And she felt Cale's steady presence lingering in her memory. And she felt the weight of Rylan's love, deep-rooted and undeniable. Her world tilted. Rylan stepped closer, holding the carving out to her. Ayla, can I try again? The courtyard grew silent around them. Servants paused, guards watched. Even the lantern flames seemed to still. Ayla stood there, heart pounding, torn open, trembling with truth she could barely hold. She didn't answer. She couldn't. But she stepped forward. Just one step, a small one, a silent one. Her breath caught. Rylan's did too. She stood before him, close enough to feel his warmth, close enough to see the hope breaking through his fear. She didn't speak, not yet, but that single step said everything she was too afraid to voice, everything her heart still believed. The air in the northern courtyard felt heavy enough to crush a kingdom. Lanterns flickered above, casting gold across the stone. But nothing glowed warmly. Not tonight. Not when two men stood in opposite corners of the same truth. And Ayla stood in the center, breath trembling, heart split open. Cale arrived first, boots echoing softly. He didn't interrupt. He didn't demand an answer. He simply stopped a respectful distance away, posture straight, expression calm, too calm, the kind of calm that came before a storm. He had already accepted he could not stop. Rylan stood across from him, still holding the carved wooden hawks in his hands. His knuckles were white. His chest rose and fell too quickly, as though he were preparing for impact, as though he'd already felt it. Ayla felt both their gazes on her, but she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her pulse thundered loud enough to drown out her thoughts. I didn't ask for this, she whispered finally. I didn't want to choose. Kyle nodded once, gentle, understanding. I know. Rylan's voice was barely a breath. Neither of us wants to cause you pain. But I'm causing both of you pain, she said, voice cracking. And I hate that more than anything. Cale's gaze softened. Ayla, whatever you decide, you owe no one an apology for your heart. Rylan closed his eyes, as if bracing himself for the words that would destroy him. Ayla looked between them, Cale steady and safe, Rylan raw and pleading, the past and the future. The man who would give her everything, and the man she had given everything to. Her throat burned. Cale. He inhaled, just slightly. She swallowed. You deserve someone who can meet you with a whole heart. I don't have that to give you. Not fully. Cale nodded again. slower this time. I know, she faltered. I'm so sorry. Ayla, he said gently, don't apologize for loving someone. Don't apologize for being human. Ryland's breath hitched, but he didn't speak. Not yet. Not until she finished. Not until she said the words that would confirm whether he was standing on hope or on the edge of ruin. Ayla stepped toward Kyle. He didn't flinch or step back. He simply watched her with eyes that held no bitterness, no resentment, only quiet acceptance and something that felt like respect. You are extraordinary, she whispered, and someone will be lucky to stand beside you. Just not you, Kale finished softly. Her lips trembled. I wish. Don't, he interrupted, voice smooth, composed, heartbreak buried beneath dignity. Wishing is crueler than truth. A tear slid down her cheek. Kyle reached up but didn't touch her, his hand stopping inches from her face, fingers curling slowly as he let his arm fall. This was never about me winning, he said quietly. It was about you being free to choose. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Kale stepped back, steady as stone, steady as a man carrying his heartbreak without letting it spill. Take care of her, he said to Rylan, without turning his head. Rylan's voice broke. I will. Kyle nodded once, crisp and honorable, and walked away before she could crumble completely. He didn't rush. He didn't look back. He left the courtyard with the grace of someone who knew how to lose without losing himself. When he disappeared into the shadows, Ayla's knees nearly gave out. Rylan was already moving, but he stopped a few feet away, close enough for warmth, distant enough for respect. Ayla, he whispered, voice shaking. You chose me. Her breath quivered. I think. I always did, even when I didn't want to. Ryland's chest rose sharply as if he'd been struck. I don't deserve that. I don't deserve you. No, she agreed softly, but you're trying, and that matters. A single tear slipped down his face, catching the lantern light like a falling star. She had never seen him cry before, not as a prince, not as a man. The vulnerability undid her. He stepped closer, slowly, reverently, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. When he finally reached her, he didn't touch her immediately. He simply stood before her, breathing the same trembling air, eyes full of grief and hope tangled together. Ayla, he whispered, I thought I lost you forever. You almost did. His voice cracked, raw. I will spend my life undoing the hurt I caused. And then, only then, did he reach for her hand. Not grasping, not claiming, just offering. Ayla exhaled, shaking, overwhelmed by relief, sorrow, longing, and the terrifying promise of a future she never thought she'd have again. She took his hand. The choice was made. But the path ahead, that was the part she wasn't ready to breathe into words. Not yet. She stood there, hand in his, chest tight, eyes soft, every emotion trembling across her skin. And she still couldn't speak. Not yet, not tonight. But she didn't need to. Not when Ryland's vow still hung in the night air, golden and devastating. I will spend my life undoing the hurt I caused. The morning after her choice, the world felt strangely new, like someone had taken the familiar, shaken it gently, and set it back down in a different place. Ayla hadn't slept much, but she didn't feel tired. She felt suspended between fear and hope, between the past and the future, between the girl she had been and the woman she'd chosen to become. And for the first time since returning to the kingdom, she wasn't running from her own heart. She found Rylan waiting in the eastern gardens, where the sunlight broke through the treetops in honey gold ribbons. It was a place they had once escaped to as children, trading secrets and stolen pastries. Now it felt quieter, older, softened by memory. Ryland stood near the stone fountain, turning the carved wooden hawks slowly in his hands. When he saw her approaching, his breath caught, as if he still didn't quite believe she was there. "Ayla," he said softly. Her name, spoken gently by him, stirred something deep and familiar inside her. She tried to ignore the flutter it caused, failed miserably. She walked toward him, her steps slow, deliberate. "I didn't think you'd be awake this early." "I didn't sleep much," he admitted. "Too many thoughts, too much fear, too much hope." She looked away before she melted completely. "You don't need to fear me." He huffed a quiet laugh. "I fear disappointing you again. I fear losing you again. But standing here," his voice lowered, "I'm trying to learn courage." The old Rylan would have tried to charm her. This one tried to be honest. The difference made her chest ache. She approached the fountain and dipped her fingers into the cool water. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "I know." He set the carving down gently on the fountain's edge. "Say anything you need. Ask anything you want. I won't hide from it this time." She studied him for a long breath. His posture was open, not defensive. His eyes were steady, not evasive. Something had shifted inside him. Something deep and real. "Why didn't you fight for me?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Not then. Not when it mattered." He winced, not at her accusation, at his own memories. "Because I was a boy wearing a crown too heavy for my shoulders. Because I believed obedience equaled strength. Because fear ruled me more than love did." His voice cracked. "And because I didn't know yet that losing you would be the worst consequence of all." The words pierced her, but gently, like truth finally finding its home. "I thought you stopped loving me," she whispered. Ryland's expression broke open. "Never. Not for a single day. I buried it. I suppressed it. I tried every method the council suggested for detachment. None of it worked. You were in every plan I tried to make without you." Ayla's breath trembled. "I didn't want to choose you because I was afraid you'd break me again." "That fear is deserved," he said softly, "and I will never ask you to pretend the past didn't happen. I will only ask for the chance to build something stronger than it." She looked at him then, really looked, at the man marked by regret, at the prince who finally chose honesty over duty, at the boy she once loved, now grown into someone she barely recognized, but deeply hoped to know again. "I'm not the same girl," she murmured. "I know," he said, "and I'm not the same boy." A long silence stretched between them, not heavy this time, but full of a possibility. Ayla sank onto the fountain's edge. He sat beside her, leaving a measured distance between them, a distance that respected her boundaries instead of assuming closeness. It was the smallest gesture. It meant everything. "How do we rebuild this?" she whispered. "Where do we even start?" He glanced at the carving. "We start with who we were," he said, "and decide who we want to become." She exhaled softly. "I don't want perfection, Rylan." "Good," he murmured, "because I don't have that to give." "What can you give?" "Consistency." His voice steadied. "Truth, space, support, and love that isn't quiet or hidden or performed for politics. Love that's yours, freely." Her throat tightened painfully. "It scares me to trust you." "I know," he said yet again, simple and understanding. and I accept that. He didn't reach for her hand. He waited. Ayla realized suddenly how different this was from before. Back then, Rylan had been careless with comfort, confident she'd always remain. Now he treated her heart like something fragile. Not because he thought her weak, but because he recognized the strength it took for her to return at all. I saw Cale this morning, she said quietly. Ryland's jaw tightened, but he nodded. How is he? Hurt, she admitted, but dignified. He always is. Ayla traced a pattern on the stone with her fingertip. I feel guilty. Don't, Ryland said immediately. He offered his heart knowing it might break. He wasn't betrayed. He was honest. And you chose honestly. She swallowed. He told me he would never let me regret choosing him. Ryland inhaled sharply, but held his composure. He meant it. Yes. And yet, you chose me. She hesitated. I chose the man who hurt me, but who is trying to become someone better because he did. Ryland's breath shuddered out of him like a prayer. She wasn't sure who reached first, but their hands touched. Lightly, barely, a brush, skin warm against skin. Ayla didn't pull away. Ryland didn't move closer. They simply stayed like that, touching, not claiming, feeling the fragile beginning of something mending between them. The wind rustled the branches overhead. Golden sunlight slid across their faces. Birds sang somewhere above, unaware of the fragile miracle unfolding below. Ryland spoke quietly. May I show you something? Ayla nodded. He stood and offered his hand, not demanding, simply an invitation. She took it, allowing herself this small intimacy. He led her through the palace corridors, avoiding crowded halls, choosing quiet routes as though he wanted to give her peace instead of spectacle. When they reached the old library, a place she had adored as a girl, he pushed open the heavy door. A table was cleared at the center of the room. On it, dozens of parchment pages were laid in neat rows. What is all this? She whispered. Every proposal, treaty, and alliance plan I've drafted since the council ended your betrothal. Ayla blinked. Why would you show me this? Because I want you to see who I used to be, he said, voice low, and who I'm choosing to be now. She stepped closer, reading the notes. Most were marked with crossed-out lines, rewritten phrases, alternatives scribbled in frustration. Some pages had her name written in the margins beside short lines. Too harsh, unfair to her. Find another way. Ayla's chest tightened. You questioned their order. I hated it, he admitted, but I didn't have the courage to defy them, and I despised myself for that. She looked up at him, eyes burning. Rylan, I show you this, he said. Not for pity, not to excuse myself, but because trust isn't rebuilt with promises. It's rebuilt with transparency, with action, with truth. Ayla touched one of the parchment edges. You really have changed. I'm still changing. And what do you want now? He stepped closer, slowly, carefully. I want a future with you, but I want that future to be one you choose freely, without pressure or expectation. Her heart swelled painfully. What if I'm afraid? Then I'll be patient. His voice softened. And I'll stay. She closed her eyes. She saw Cale's steadiness. She saw Ryland's regret. She saw her own heart, bruised, but still beating towards something bright. When she opened her eyes again, Raylan was watching her with a tenderness that shook the breath out of her. Rylan, she whispered, I want to try. He exhaled, slow, trembling, disbelieving. Ayla, I'm choosing not the man who broke me, she said quietly. but the man who came back to mend what he ruined. A sound escaped him, too soft to be a sob, too raw to be anything else. He took one step forward, then another, and when he reached her, he cupped her cheek with a hand that shook. "Do I have permission?" he whispered. "Yes." He leaned his forehead gently against hers. No kiss, no grand gesture, just closeness rebuilt with reverence. Ayla closed her eyes, letting herself feel everything: fear, hope, grief, love. And for the first time, those feelings didn't tear her apart. They stitched her back together. Rylan pulled back just enough to meet her gaze. "I won't promise perfection," he said softly, "but I will promise effort, growth, devotion, and a lifetime proving I deserve this second chance." Ayla breathed him in, warm, soft, trembling with sincerity. "I don't need perfection," she whispered. "I need you to be the man you choose to become." "I am," he said, "because of you." Golden light pooled around them, wrapping the library in quiet warmth. Outside, life continued, guards walking, servants bustling, the world turning. But here, in this room, Ayla felt something settle inside her, something whole. She touched the wooden carving in his pocket, feeling the smooth grain beneath his coat. "We were children when we made that," she said. "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said softly, "we're choosing each other as we are, not as we once wished to be." He closed his eyes, forehead brushing hers again. And in that golden dark stillness, Ayla realized something profound. She hadn't chosen the perfect man. She had chosen the man who fought to become better for her. And she didn't regret it. Not anymore. Not ever again. Thank you for listening. If this story found a place in you, come back when your heart wants another. With love, Claire,